Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Eczema Podcast. Today, I have another episode for you, and it's all about how to choose a good CBD for eczema. And I know that this is a really hot topic right now. There is a lot of buzz around it, and tons of CBD products are coming out on the market at a very fast pace. So I thought that today I would bring my guest to address it. My guest is actually a holistic dermatologist, and she is actually one of the first holistic dermatologists that actually started in the US, and she helped to pioneer the integrative dermatology movement, which I find is amazing. And I am just so thankful for her because she's even written a 400-page book about skincare and dermatology. She also wrote the first 3 chapters to Dr. Andy Weil's textbook. In case you haven't heard of him, he's also a very well-known doctor. And I just love that she is spreading the message about integrative dermatology. She's also an expert on conventional and natural skincare therapies. She had her own skincare line, and I know she consults with other skincare companies and helps them as well. She was also asked to join the elite Complementary and Alternative Medicine Task Force of the American Academy of Dermatology in 2013. And I am just so excited to have her today. She has also published articles in other publications such as the Dermatology Times, Plastic Surgery Times, Organic Spa Magazine, Natural Insider, and for Dr. Oz, Good Life Magazine, and Fortune.com. She also has contributed to the National Product Insider regarding CBD, and she spoke at the Cannabis World Conference as well back in 2016. So she is definitely well versed in CBD, and I look forward to having her share her knowledge with you. And I just want to thank you again for listening to this podcast. Be sure to leave an iTunes review if you enjoy listening to this. And I also just want to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by my Conqueror Dry Skin Soothing Balm and my Conqueror Soothing Bath Treatment, both of which I used during my hardest times and my flare-ups. And it really just helped to moisturize my skin. And it's all natural ingredients, and you can find it at my store. Just head to eczemaconquerors.com and head to the store section. You can also get 10% off by typing podcast 10. That is podcast 10, and you'll get 10% off. So without further ado, let's get started with today's podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the Eczema Podcast, where you'll learn tips, products, and natural eczema remedies from Abby, registered holistic nutritionist and founder of eczemaconquerors.com. Stay tuned as she invites experts in the field. Here's your host of the Eczema Podcast, Abby.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Eczema Podcast. Today, I have a great guest for you, and I believe that she is the first holistic dermatologist that we've had on the show. I have had dermatologists on before who have had a holistic side, but I think Jeanette has more of a holistic side than other dermatologists that I've had on the show. And she also has a skincare line, and she is a speaker as well, and an author of a 400-page book on skincare, and I'll let her share more about it. So welcome, Jeanette, to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know that you recently spoke at the Integrative Dermatology Symposium and at another conference as well, so you're busy speaking. And yeah, I would just love to know more about your story, how you got into practicing dermatology, and then also how you got into integrative dermatology as well.
Well, I trained back east in Virginia, which is conservative, and I loved internal medicine and the problems, solving those problems. But I got into dermatology because I noticed the dermatologists were a lot happier than the internists, and also because I have a visual memory. It went along well with seeing skin lesions. And so that was really fun for me. And I originally had a traditional practice in Florida. And but I came west to Arizona and to California. I got into integrative derm very early. I was really probably the first one in because or one of the first ones in. I had some health issues myself, so I started looking into all these holistic treatments, herbal, homeopathy, acupuncture, mind-body medicine. And I decided that then there's no book on those treatments as concerns dermatology. So I decided to write the book, and I was very lucky. Penguin Putnam published it, and it ends up being about 400 pages on 33 different diseases. And I took them from a traditional treatment like you would get in a traditional dermatologist, and then the different treatments at the time that homeopathy or herbals or all that could offer. And from there, I got asked to write an article for Supply Side West magazine. Back then it was a magazine and not an online site. And then they asked me to speak at their conference, which is a national conference. Everything went really well. And what I would do for about the last 8 years is I would go to Whole Foods and see what the products were in the foods, the new naturals, the new herbs that they were promoting or that were popular. Then I would go back and look in the PubMed and see if there was any literature about it in dermatology around the world. And then I would just make up my talks, and it was all brand new material about these different herbals from around the world that could be used in skincare, because there were studies internationally showing they either help for acne or dry skin or anti-aging or things like that. So after the first talk, I decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and apply to many different conferences. So I ended up speaking about 50 conferences internationally in the US and Canada on different herbals every year, and was quoted by different magazines and articles. And then I decided I wanted a new challenge, so I went around to about 5 dermatology departments at grand rounds and introduced to them integrative dermatology or supplements that were good for skincare. And then my next self-assigned challenge was to get into CBD, because I had a friend who brought a CBD cream over for pain for my ankle that was hurting. And I was shocked to find that it was more effective for pain than for the lidocaine patch. So then this was like 3 or 4 years ago, and no one was really into CBD, just a handful of people. And I was shocked out of my mind when I looked on PubMed and saw that there were all these studies about CBD and skincare and all these other things, because it had been outlawed in the US, but yet other countries were far ahead. So the last 3 years I've been giving talks around the country at national conventions on the science behind CBD in skincare, as in terms of acne, psoriasis, eczema, anti-aging, and other things. And I recently became brand ambassador for Medterra, a great quality line. It's available in CVS and many other places. But so it kind of just evolved naturally, and I love going to the conferences, learning new information, speaking, and meeting new people.
That's so great. And I know you mentioned that you're one of the first integrative dermatologists. And I think that's just so amazing that, you were one of the pioneers. And are there actually many integrative dermatologists out there right now, or is it still fairly new?
It's fairly new, but there were 400 people, dermatologists and naturopaths at this conference, which was the second one they held. So I think and they were mostly like in their 30s, the dermatologists and naturopaths. So I think the young people are picking it up. And then the leaders in the field have caught on, because that's why they're leaders. So they've been asked to talk. Several of the leaders talk there. There's actually been an integrative dermatology subgroup at the American Academy of Dermatology for at least 20 years. But it's had 3 different groups of people. As it gets disbanded, then the young people try again, and then it gets disbanded and they try again. But I think it's more accepted, because I was the first one to give a talk at the American Academy of Dermatology on topical CBD in skincare. I was shocked out of my mind that they let me talk there in 2018 because it's a traditional organization. So I think there's a lot of interest because the patients are coming to the doctors and saying, I'm trying CBD or CBD with THC topically, and it's really helped this, and this. And so the doctors want to learn about it. And this year it really exploded with a lot of places where you can get CMEs and learn about cannabis, not only CBD, but cannabis in skincare and in other medical aspects. And they're medically based on the studies instead of just anecdotal. There are many anecdotes on the internet, but as scientists, we always like to see double-blind studies, or in the past we did. Sometimes it's not possible. So if a patient says it works, it's pretty good to believe them.
That's so great. And I would love to learn more about CBD and the science behind it, and why it actually helps eczema. So if you could share more about the science behind it and how it actually helps the skin, I would love to learn more.
Well, CBD is one of 130 cannabinoids that's found in hemp and marijuana. And one of its big roles is in regulating inflammation. And as we know, eczema is a inflammatory disease. Now, why it works on the skin is the skin has its own endocannabinoid system, which has CB1 and CB2 receptors, and probably more that we don't know yet. But these CB1 cannabis receptors are in the layers of the keratinocytes, they're in the sebaceous glands, they're in the hair follicles, they're in the nerve fibers innervating the hair follicles, they're in the immune cells in the dermis. So they're out throughout the entire skin. And so this is an ideal place to see that that topical cannabinoids really do work on the skin, and why. Now, there have been 3 or 4 different studies on eczema that showed different mechanisms of action. And these were double-blind studies done independently, not associated with companies. They were all done overseas because until last year, it was very difficult to do, or this year really, it was very difficult to do any research, meaningful research on CBD or cannabis in this country. So in the past, it's been found that actually hemp seed oil itself can help eczema topically and orally. But CBD is stronger. And in 2013, GAFL showed that cannabinoid 1 receptors in mouse skin cells lessened induced atopic-like dermatitis. The mouse cells, which didn't have the cannabis 1 receptors, secreted increased levels of a mediator that drives skin inflammation in atopic dermatitis. So having those cannabis 1 receptors and having them accept either topical CBD, or our own body makes anandamide, which works on the receptors, that decreases the skin inflammation in atopic dermatitis. And in Kim, in 2015, he actually used humans instead of mice, and he found that a topical cannabinoid receptor 1 agonist, something similar to anandamide, which our body makes, or CBD, lessened the skin's both acute and chronic anti-inflammatory responses in an atopic dermatitis model. And he looked under the microscope, found that this confirmed the anti-inflammatory effects. NAM, in another country, 2016, found that CB1 agents such as anandamide, which we all make in our own body, may be used for relieving inflammatory symptoms mediated by mast cell activation, which is an immune cell in skin challenges such as eczema. So we've had several studies, and they've shown different mechanisms of action on how cannabinoids can help. There's also been quite a few studies with PEA, or phenylethylamine, which you can actually get over the counter in Amazon, and it acts on the receptors like a CB1 receptor, CB2 receptor. And there have been several studies done just on this PEA. Let's see, there was Eberlein in 2008, Kirk in 2010, and Carbone and Sui in 2010. And they all showed that PEA lessened symptoms and the inflammation in atopic dermatitis, decreased the severity of itch, and they showed that it worked by different mechanisms as well, different inflammatory mechanisms. Then there was another study, GAFL study worked on the lessening the Th2 type allergic inflammatory responses.
Do you usually find it more effective if someone takes it internally versus putting it on topically?
Well, I did not look at the studies for internal. So I just looked at the studies, and right now we can't really make claims about anything according to the FDA, but I can just quote the studies. And in none of the studies did they take it orally. So anecdotally, it's important to know that CBD works on some people and not on others. Some people can take CBD and they report decreased in anxiety, decreased in eczema symptoms, decreased in pain, and other people it has no effect on. So it's very individual, and the dosing is very individual. We have not yet come up with individual dosing because everybody's so different and the field is so new. So I could just say anecdotally there are some anecdotes, but I did not see any studies on taking oral CBD.
That is actually very different. Not different. That is actually very interesting. How you mentioned that it works for some people, but not everyone. I guess it's almost like how even supplements or drugs can work for some people and not everyone.
It's just really the same as any other supplement or drug or herbal or even acupuncture. Works for some people, or homeopathy or herbal. Some people do very well with it and some people don't. It's just we're all different genetically and epigenetically.
Yeah, I agree with that. In regards to CBD, can you also let our viewers know more about the type of CBD? So I think the type you're referring to is the one without THC, right?
It's from hemp. That's the difference. Is it's without THC, like Madeiras is 99% CBDs, less than 1% THC. So that's okayed by the DEA. But CBD can come from hemp or marijuana. And the difference is marijuana has greater than 0.3% THC and hemp has less than 0.3% THC. Now, they were originally the same plant, Cannabis sativa, but over centuries, the hemp was grown and cultivated. This is nothing new. It's since the time of China. They were cultivated. The hemp was grown for fiber, to make wood, to make clothing, to make ropes. And so it was cultivated for those qualities. And then the marijuana was cultivated for the mystical, spiritual, religious, and mind-blowing properties of the THC. So that's how they kind of branched out. Nowadays, in the last year, since the Hemp Farm Bill passed in December of 2018, everyone and their brother is growing hemp and trying to get high strains of CBD in the hemp so that, because that's what's legal, to sell the CBD from the hemp. But you do have to be very careful because the hemp from industrial hemp, which is grown now in Kentucky, Oregon, or wherever, is actually comes from the processing of the fibers. And it's not actually from the oil from the seeds. So you have to be very careful because if you buy something that says cannabis sativa oil, it means that it doesn't have, unless it's got CBD added, it doesn't have hardly any CBD. So you have to be careful with that. Whereas the CBD from the marijuana plant does come from the flower, and the CBD from the hemp plant comes from the processing of the flowers and all.
That's actually very interesting. So just to trace back a second, just so our viewers have some background, but if the THC is above 0.3%, that is basically that classifies it more as a drug, right? And
Medical marijuana, yes. And so it has either medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, or depending on the state you're in. Some states allow you to have medical marijuana for certain indications only, such as pain, seizures, anxiety. And you have to go to a medical marijuana doctor and get a license. Some states allow recreational, like California, where you don't have to have a medical reason to go to the medical marijuana store and buy marijuana for recreational purposes. And then some states aren't yet medically approved for marijuana. Every state has been doing it differently. But federally, you're allowed to grow hemp now.
Interesting. So I know that our viewers should be looking for hemp that is below 0.3% so that it is a legal amount to actually be able to use even topically on our skin, right? And I guess one thing I'm wondering is how do we actually choose a source that's good, that doesn't have mold, that's organic? Are there a lot that have mold and toxins on them?
They're unfortunately, because it's unregulated, a lot of the packaging has nothing to do with what's inside the package. And what you look for, how to pick a CBD product in particular, you look for how many CBD milligrams are on the packaging. I should say 250 milligrams, in 2 ounces or 4 ounces or 750 milligrams. Then you look at the back and it lists the ingredient profile. The top of the list is where they have the highest percentage of the ingredient, and at the bottom of the list is where there are trace amounts of the ingredient. So if you find CBD near the top of the list, that means there is a lot of CBD in there, as long as the packaging is reflected in the product. And then if it's at the very bottom, they're just putting it in there for marketing because it's hardly any trace amounts in it. The other thing you would want to look for is a certificate of analysis. That shows that it has been third-party tested, independently tested, to be sure that everything is in there that they say is in there. And there are other things to look for, whether it's organically grown. Some are organically grown. Some are grown in one field, so that if you use multiple fields, you don't know if maybe some marijuana seeds came over from the field next door or something like that. Also, I personally like to go to this site, www.naturalpartners.com. It's a great source for medical doctors and naturopaths to buy their products, and they do a lot of due diligence, and I really think they only have products on there that are good. So I'm not sure that an individual can buy that, but some of them you can buy over the counter, like Medterra, you can buy over the counter at CVS. They sell at naturalpartners.com. So they're a quality product. Plus looking at the certificate of analysis. And then there's about only 11 companies that are part of the Hemp Association that have been guaranteed that their hemp fields are pure. And again, Medterra is one of those. But there are many good lines, and Medterra isn't the only one. And as I say, looking at naturalpartners.com is really helpful.
I've started asking for a certificate of analysis from companies now, just to make sure that what they say is in there is actually in there. Right. And there's been times that it lists that there's yeast and mold. And I've gone back to a company to ask them the amount and what it actually means when they list it out, but I emailed them twice and they never got back to me.
Well, yeah. They're not going to, probably.
Yeah. And also I know some companies won't give it to you if you ask for it.
Bad sign.
Yeah, that's usually a bad sign that maybe they're hiding something or not as transparent, which isn't so great. But I'm wondering, out of all the CBD I guess, yeah, all of the CBDs that exist out there, because there's a lot. I guess, what percentage would you say is actually good quality? For example, like 10%, 20% of the CBD on the market?
That would be really hard to say because like 3 years ago, there were only like 10 topical lines, and then everybody smelled the money, and at least about 100 or 1,000 lines have come in now. So I don't know every line. I just know the good ones that have been around for a while, or at least 2 years. It's a while in this world. So I really can't hazard a guess how many. A lot of them, though, are actually, what they do is they put their name on it, but they're private label. So somebody else came up with the formula, and actually a lot of them are probably selling the same formula just with a different name, their name. But private label means some lab came up with it, but you can put your name on it. So I would say a large percentage of the new ones just did that. They didn't have time to find a hemp field, to get the chain supply, to get all this stuff done. They just bought the cream ready-made and put their name on it, opened up a website and started trying to sell it to the next guy.
That's actually really interesting. And that you mentioned that everything is growing so fast, and we actually can regulate how the quality is and whether things are actually good or not. So yeah, that's very interesting. Also, I'm wondering, in terms of topical or internal, is there like a minimum dose you've seen that people should be using at least to see a difference?
That's a really difficult question too, because everybody is different. But generally, the practitioners say to start at a lower dose and go up because it's very expensive, and titrate up to the dose that works for you for whatever indication it is. So say you start at 250 milligrams of CBD in a 2-ounce product. It's not doing that much for your whatever your skin problem is. Then try the 750, which is, of course, going to be more expensive. But you just start a little lower and then go up because of the cost.
And have you ever seen any of your, or have you ever seen anyone who has had negative side effects from CBD?
I really haven't. And in all the studies that I reviewed, they didn't have any contact derm, any itch, any allergy. Like, a lot of topical products you do get allergic to, even steroids. So people are allergic to some of the products that the steroids are put in or whatever. But of course, there weren't a lot of people in each of these studies, but it was safe in all of them. And I personally haven't had anybody anecdotally tell me that.
That's actually really interesting. I would think that even with creams, I've heard of people having negative reactions. So that's great that CBD is safe to use.
Well, I can't say 100% in everybody because it's been a very small sampling that the studies have been done in. So I'm never going to say 100%. But in all the studies I read, it was 100% safe in those studies.
And I've also been approached by a lot of companies who have told me that CBD is safe for pregnant women, breastfeeding, and also babies and kids. I wanted to know your thoughts on that as well.
Well, I think I need to study that further because I'm not convinced of it yet. I have to look at the literature, which I haven't done for that, and before I make a claim like that. I need to see the studies.
I think that's a great idea too, because even in terms of pregnancy, I know CBD is still really early, and I'm not sure if there are studies that have been done on it. But
I think there have been. Really? Thank you. I'm going to look into that.
Because my naturopath, she mentioned that even with things like homeopathic medicine, people have mentioned it's safe during pregnancy, but she mentioned that during the first trimester when the baby's growing, we just don't have enough studies to prove that it is safe. So we just don't know with things like that.
Well, I would agree. I mean, and also homeopathy can have side effects. I took it once and I got deep bone pain from cancer. So it's not, all of these things are not, just because they come from natural plants doesn't mean you can't have side effects.
And Jeanette, I would love to know what your thoughts are on. I know the brand that you recommend. What makes them different from other brands on the market?
Well, there are other good brands. I'm not saying there aren't, but they're tested multiple times during the process. So it's not tested just one time. And they also have their own hemp fields, dedicated hemp fields to ensure a single source. And they are doing research on their products by a university professor to confirm the effectiveness of the product. Also, it's over 95% naturally sourced, and at least half the ingredients are organic also. So, they got a certificate of analysis. They're one of the few companies that are in this hemp category of great hemp companies. Like I say, there's like 11. And they put the milligrams of CBD on the packaging. They have their certificate of analysis. They're now with new natural partners. And mostly I go also by the CEO. The CEO is a very good leader. And sometimes you can tell, if they're after just the money or they're actually trying to help people as well.
That's actually very important because I guess you can tell it through, the ingredients that they put in.
Right.
The ingredients they put in, and as well as, the certifications and the third-party testing. That's so important as well.
Well, they really want it to work. They're not in for the short term. A lot of people are in just to grab as much as they can, even if it's doing it illegally or not. But they're in for the long term to be a global entity. And that's a good thing too.
Yeah, that's great. I looked on the website and I actually saw that their ingredients are really clean. So if people want to learn more about this brand, where can they go to find out more about it? Do you have their website or?
It's Medterra, MEDTERRA, CBD.com.
That's great. Thank you. What are your thoughts on liposomal CBD? Because that's a term that I've heard recently from one of the other companies out there.
Well, I think a lot of people are working on that to see if they can put it in liposomal form, that it'll be absorbed more quickly and get in to a greater level. I'm not sure how successful each of the companies have been yet. Which company did you hear that from?
I think it's called, they had a product called Recept. I think it was Prime My Body.
Oh, I hadn't heard of that, but I do know that Medterra professor and chemist is working on liposomal function as well for their products.
Oh, that's really good to hear.
For the future, yes.
And I know you came up with your own skincare line as well, so you're also very knowledgeable in terms of making your own. Yeah,
that was about 15 years ago. That was just before naturals became a big hit. And so I went through the whole process of doing it myself, skincare line. Because I didn't have investors or a lot of people helping me. I did it all myself, so I do know all the steps.
Wow, that's really great. It takes a lot of work to make your own skincare line.
It really does, if you don't just buy somebody else's private label.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. Are there any last words or pieces of advice that you want to let our audience know about CBD or anything to do with CBD and eczema?
There are, it's a whole lifestyle around eczema, as most of your clientele probably know, about not taking too hot baths. It's about moisturizing, and about some people sometimes have food sensitivities. You can have access to my book at my website. It is 20 years old, the literature. There's been a new, but a lot of it's still relevant. It's at drjacknin.com. You can purchase it for $10. Or there is another integrative dermatology book that came out. It's under Dr. Weil's name. But I wrote the first 2 chapters, and then other dermatologists, most of them professors, wrote the rest of the chapters. So that's more recent. I believe it came out about 5 years ago. So I think that maybe the same group of this integrative dermatologists that meet at the American Academy of Dermatology, there's usually about 13 of us, are planning to come out with a third book eventually to update everything. Also, Dr. Peter Lio, Lio, is a national expert on eczema, and he spoke at the Integrative Dermatology Conference, and he's out of Chicago. And I don't know, but I'm sure he's published some things, or there may be some things on his website.
Yeah, he's been on the show a few times as well. He's really great. He has a lot of information to share.
And a lot of passion. He was at the conference and is a really passionate, friendly personality.
Definitely. I definitely agree. So thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And you gave a lot of helpful information for all of us to know. If people want to learn more about your book, I know you mentioned the website. Do you mind spelling it out for some people who are just listening as well?
Yes, it's www.drjacknin.com. And my book is on there. I own the rights now, so I would send anybody who wants to buy it for $10 an e-copy of the book.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Eczema Podcast. And stay tuned for our next episode. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass it along to your friends. Visit eczemaconquerors.com for more articles and tips. Thanks for listening.